Alright, y'all, so today I want to do a very quick review of the last Destiny 2014 or Vanilla Destiny's major expansion. That is, of course, we're going to be talking about Destiny, The Rise of Iron. I recently got the chance to play through the campaign, some of the strikes, and the in-game content, and I just wanted to give you my thoughts on Destiny, The Rise of Iron. So, considering the fact that this is an expansion that is, well, the last major expansion that was created for Destiny 1 before they moved on to Destiny 2, there's, of course, a lot of nostalgia in the Destiny community for this expansion, and weirdly, I've seen, especially in Destiny 2, Bungie's kind of ignored this expansion. They've kind of made you forget about this one, which is a bit of a shame because, honestly, my quick thoughts on this expansion, it's pretty good. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that this is a Taken King. I personally think Taken King was a better executed campaign. There was more in-game content. And, in general, I just think overall was a better and bigger expansion. But regardless, I don't think this is anything to scoff at, right? This expansion, Rise of Iron. There is a lot of really cool stuff. So I'm going to get into some of the pros, the cons, a little general summary, and then my overall thoughts on this expansion. To give you a quick little summary on this expansion, if you kind of forgot about the story, you basically follow this dude called Paladin. He's the last of these guys called the Iron Wards. Think of them as basically pre-Guardians, before the last city and the tower and the Vanguard was established. Part of all the people that got risen by the Traveler. These people kind of had to do like a grassroots organization to save people and form together. In a lot of ways, like I said, they are pre-Guardians. They have a very interesting look to them and all this. Now, at some point, these Iron Wards tried to help humanity by messing with a technology called SIVA, which is basically AI. It's an AI entity that grows, expands, it changes. And this is also really unstable, and it's also very relentless in objectives. Once it's set on its objective, it can't refrain or change from that objective. And they tried to harness the power of SIVA. They couldn't. As a result, a lot of Iron Wards died, and then as a result, Paladin becomes the last Iron Ward, which is basically the setup for the expansion. And we basically team up with him. We get the Fairwinter, or the mountain sort of outpost that's near the Cosmodrome on Earth, restored for the Iron Wards. We fight Sepsix Prime again, which, huge nostalgia for that very first campaign, right? But he's upgraded with this SIVA technology. And this introduces a new faction in this Destiny game. That is, of course, we're going to be talking about the slivers, or the slicers, so to speak. These are guys that are spliced with SIVA. They're fallen. They come from the House of Devils. And they're basically, they can throw red energy projectiles at you. They're more violent and erratic than regular fallen enemies are. And, like I said, they're also enhanced. And SIVA, in general, the look of it is this weird kind of triangle red-looking substance. And it's spliced throughout their whole bodies. And that's basically the new faction of this expansion. There's also kind of a huge environmental shift of sorts in this expansion. It's set in areas of the Cosmodrome we really haven't seen, and even some areas that we have seen, but it's all completely covered in snow and cold and winter, and it really creates a great look for this expansion. It makes it stand out from previous ones. Like, you remember the cold and the winter and the darkness in this expansion, of course, after you play it a lot more than other expansions and updates in Destiny history. But to basically wrap the story up very quickly, we basically defeat Sepsix Prime. We go to the SIVA regeneration chamber because we have to destroy it so that SIVA can't be regenerated. We basically successfully do so after we destroy reanimated dead Iron Wards revived by SIVA. And we barely get out with our lives, and then we basically, some of the end game is basically we can kill this prophet who's been using the remaining SIVA that's available to, equip his army and also attempt to manipulate the Hive. We do so, we kill him in, honestly, a fantastic strike, And there's also other in-game content and patrols you can do throughout this new area. Pretty great stuff. And I'm going to get into some more of my pros for this expansion. Like I already mentioned, I love the new look of this expansion. It's cold. I love the snow. I love how they use a lot of environmental storytelling and they show the power of Siva. It's really cool. I also like how Siva looks for the most part. I like the design aesthetic. I like how the red, especially contrasts with the white environments and how it courses through the Fallen. And in a lot of ways, you can kind of view it like the Taken, but this is also more like the Flood. It's really interesting, and I like the design aesthetics. I also like the concept of the Iron Wards. I thought that the story on surface level was decently set up. I mean, you see him and his companions die. It gives some motivation and credence to avenge those deaths, which we do by the end of the campaign. And I like that part of the story. It sets it up pretty nicely. And, it's like I said, it's also pretty cool seeing all the new locations, the new outposts, and new characters. It's all really cool stuff. And even the weapon, you get like an Iron Ward sword at the end of the campaign, which is like an exotic. And it's really cool. It's great gear. And I also like some of the strikes. I already mentioned, but one of the best strikes ever, which is the one you fight the priest in at the end game for this campaign, is always great. I thought it was really creative and inventive. Compared to other Destiny 1 strikes. And I like the design aesthetic of everything. I like how the Iron Wards look, and I like aspects of the story. I also like some of the missions. I think the first mission where we get to discover Siva was pretty well done. I do like the last mission, where you're basically going into the Siva regeneration chamber, which, I mean, design-wise, Bungie's always killed with the art aesthetic. And it's no different here. It's great. And I also like how you fight reanimated Iron Wards. The only thing I think makes it bittersweet is that we don't get to have Paladin with us, which I think would have really been more interesting in terms of story. But regardless, I thought that was a really cool and interesting boss fight. And, there's just a lot of really cool moments in this campaign. And overall, it's a pretty decent story. I mean, the story is decently coherent from point A to point B. It's not as incoherent as Destiny 1's campaign. But I will say that now I'm going to get into some of my cons for this expansion. It's not as tight or as interesting as Destiny 1, the Taken King story was. That story had charm, wit. I mean, Cayde 6 was so funny in it. You get a similar kind of character here, which in his own right's not too bad. He comes from the Vanguard as well. But I always feel like, I do think the Ghost does make a lot of really funny jokes throughout the campaign. There's not really a sort of charisma to the characters here. They're all kind of stoic, and I also think, too, we could have gone a lot more into development of the Iron Wards, the background, the history of them. What is Paladin thinking? I think there was also missed opportunities where Paladin's not with us in the gameplay, because I'm sure he would have had something to say about the fact that we fought his reanimated brothers and sisters in the Iron Wards. That was kind of a little bit of a missed opportunity. And like I said, too, I mean, the Grimoire cards and the lore that was added for this expansion is pretty cool, but it does suffer from a problem where it's kind of not really explained in the game itself too clearly. The Iron Wards as a concept is explained, but the Siva backstory is it's kind of loosely explained, and how the Fallen got their hands on it is kind of loosely explained. I think more development and more backstory into the characters, into the general story, I think would have done wonders and made this story of the Rise of Iron a lot more consistent, clear, and very interesting. Like I said before, too, I think I like all the new locations. I just think that the story doesn't come together as nicely as the Taken King did. I think the Taken King had some really great mission design. Not saying that there aren't moments in this game that really showcase some great mission design and setup. I like the Septic Prime and the setup to that mission. I also like how we go back into the Cosmodrome, we take out these AA guns, and the setup to that was really cool and interesting. But, like I said before, I just think that as a package overall, it doesn't come together quite as nicely and as tight as the Taken King did, but regardless, it's not a huge disdain for this expansion. This expansion does a lot of really good things. I love the general theme of it. I love the general vibe and aesthetic of it. I like the Iron Lords. I love the winter aesthetic and Shiva. I just think that in general the story could have gone deeper into this backstory, deeper into the lore and the character development to make this an even stronger story in expansion. And that's it. You know, like I said, I think there's a good story at its core, just needs more development. But regardless, that was my thoughts on Destiny Rise of Iron. A pretty good expansion for the most part. Not perfect, has some problems. Not the strongest in Destiny 1, but nothing to the absurdity and chaos, I guess, chaotic nature that was the first Destiny campaign. And, you know, like I said, this expansion, too, would also be a sort of marking point for the franchise. It was the last major expansion for Destiny 1. You know, a lot of people have kind of considered this one, too, at the time, more of a stopgap of sorts. Like, Bungie was tiding players over with the Rise of Iron, and then Destiny 2 would come out and basically would become the core of the franchise with multiple expansions releasing on that game years later. And the Rise of Iron would just be the final chapter in Destiny 1. And, you know, for better for worse, right, in the franchise. I also want to quickly mention as well, I did think the campaign was a bit too short. I feel like the Taken King had a longer campaign. That's another little gripe. But regardless, you know, like I said, the Rise of Iron, it was the last major expansion of Destiny 1. I still look back on this expansion fondly. I remember memories of climbing up the mountain at Fellwinter, getting to the, you know, the little loot and stuff. And I like the general aesthetic and the vibe of this expansion, and I love the winter stuff. It's a pretty decent and good expansion. Not great, not amazing, not as great as the Taken King, but regardless, doesn't mean it's horrible. You know, Destiny Rise of Iron, which came out in 2016, is a pretty solid expansion. And honestly, you know, I look back on Destiny 1 a lot more fondly than I did at the time, and it was a nice closing chapter for a game that even to this day you can still play, at least at the time I'm making this video. But yeah, my thoughts on Destiny: The Rise of Iron. All right, peace, y'all.